Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, and I feel like Joe Biden in the 2020 election debates where that fly flew on his head. Do you remember that? Oh. And it was like sitting on his forehead. It was all weird.
So awkward.
A fly keeps flying, like it flew on my hand just now. What the hell? I'm in my basement and there's a fly. Where did that happen? Yeah, Justin, happy belated Thanksgiving, I guess.
Yeah, you as well, sir.
Yeah. No show last week because, we believe in family and God and country, so we decided to take the whole week off and not do our hobby. So, good on us.
Not do our hobby. I like that.
Yeah, and, lots of things going on. Justin's ready to have a baby, so not like you. You're not going to have a baby, physically, at least. It will be physical, but it won't be you doing any of the work.
Oh, my wife would like to think so.
Well, you can you can press on her shin. There's like a shin point you can press in there, and it's supposed to help with the pain. Anyways, sorry, okay. Hockey show, not a doula show. We have a ton to talk about on today's show because a whole bunch of stuff just dropped. We've got Dean Evason fired by the Minnesota Wild after just an atrocious stretch. They are looking worse than the Oilers almost at this point. So he's out. Bill Guerin's buddy, he had, forced to fire him. And the Chicago Blackhawks have put Corey Bedard-Perry onto waivers to terminate his contract. Do we know why? I think I know why. Do you know why? Do you know why, Justin? Do you know what the latest rumor, conspiracy theory is that's going around right now for why Corey Perry is being ushered out the door?
I've heard a rumor. I don't know if it's the same one you've heard, but I heard, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong or if it's different, but that essentially Corey Perry has been sleeping with Connor Bedard's mother.
Yes, that's why I call him Corey Bedard-Perry. Or is it Corey Perry Bedard? I don't know. It's
yeah.
Either way, it sounds like Connor can start calling him Daddy.
Daddy Perry.
Daddy Perry. I guess maybe it's more Connor Bedard-Perry. If he has to tack on that to his last name. We don't know if this is real. It is all over the place. I did check with one person who I know who has many ties to the game. I asked, and they said that essentially they would not be surprised at all, and that this is not the first time something like this has happened to Corey Perry. So take that for what it is. I didn't say it, but Corey Perry is, according to my source, is that this will be the end of his career. That was his opinion.
The end of his career?
End of his career. That he's basically in Anaheim, he was protected by Ryan Getzlaf, and from there, he kind of bounces around, and the reason why he bounced around so much is because teams and players and management just get tired of his crap, and he kind of moves on. This is the way I picture Corey Perry. After leaving Anaheim, he's kind of been a lot like that head coach. Not that Peter Laviolette has done anything like this in terms of being a deviant, but Peter Laviolette walks onto a team, and immediately that team goes to the Stanley Cup final or something. And then a couple years later, he's done. Corey Perry, kind of the same thing. He walks into a locker room, guys like him because he's willing to go to the wall for them. And then they kind of get sick of probably the extracurricular, and then he needs to go find a new home. So, hey, maybe he'll find a new home. And hopefully for a few people's sake, hopefully this rumor is not true. But it seems to have some legs. These things don't usually explode like this, just as a meme. It's not like, oh, hey, this is just a funny thing, and now people think it's real. I could be wrong, but it seems like it has some legs to it. I
mean, I've always said where there's smoke, there's fire, right? But Gosh, I feel bad for Connor Bedard if this really is true. I mean,
welcome to the NHL.
Yeah, like
son.
First year in the NHL, and you got to deal with this
son.
bullshit.
Yeah, he's like, why does he keep calling me son? Oh dear.
Oh,
well,
it's weird though. I just reading about Corey Perry's whole ordeal. I try not to buy into too many rumors, but when they essentially came out and said, most of the time when you hear about contract terminations, right, it's always quote unquote mutual. Like a guy wants to go, he's not getting playing time, so he wants to go back to the KHL or some shit like that. In this case, it was just literally just for the purposes of, termination of his contract and nothing about mutual. So, and this was a pretty quick investigation too by the team for something that was, against player conduct. So this has got to be some really
honestly,
shady shit.
Because his contract is so big, $4 million. I am waiting to hear the other side. Like, is he going to fight this? Because
absolutely.
Okay. So let's just say he did he slept with someone's mom, or he's doing something shady. I mean, it kind of is what it is. Can you really terminate a contract at this point? Like, let's think of all the people that NHL players have probably spent the night with. I mean, it's not. I don't think that I'm blowing anybody's mind here when I say that not every NHL player is a good little family man. I mean, Corey Perry does have a family,
boys, right?
Right. They're not choir boys. They've got lots of opportunities to indulge themselves. So at what point could you say, hey, this is detrimental to the team? He slept with this person who knows this person. Like, how deep down the rabbit hole are we going to be able to get? And I just don't see how you can do this. Now, maybe Corey Perry doesn't fight it, but the fact that he signed, $4 million is what his deal is, right?
Yep.
I mean, I got to think that he's going to go, well, if I'm not going to get signed by another team, I at least want my freaking money. So it will certainly be interesting. I mean,
I know what happened is, and the reason they're probably getting away with this termination, it probably what happened was he sent his son to be, Connor Bedard a dick pic of him doing his mom or something.
Oh,
got on Bedard's phone, and so,
Oh, my
So that would be absolutely
goodness.
grounds for termination. But
absolutely. I think we just got banned on 3 platforms. Yeah, I mean, from a real life human standpoint, I mean, it is funny because it's so out of left field. That's why it's funny. It's not funny because, from a real life standpoint, I get it. It's sad. It potentially, I mean, even if it's a rumor, it's just hurting families, and I understand that. We're just having fun with it, but it's just probably sounds like maybe a culmination of a lot of things just kind of coming to fruition. And Corey Perry, I mean, actually, funny enough, having kind of a decent season is likely looks like it is out the door, and it doesn't look like anybody's going to pick him up. I can't imagine somebody's going to go, oh yeah, we'll take that $4 million albatross of a contract.
Nope.
But it doesn't mean that he won't sign somewhere, right? Like he could always just go, okay, fine, my contract's terminated, and maybe I can go get $1 million somewhere for the rest of the year. I don't know.
Hey, the Rangers could use him now that they missed out on Kane and Kakko's injured. So
the Rangers, yeah. I mean, hey, say what you want about Corey Perry. If you slap him on your team, you're probably going to the Stanley Cup Finals. Like, he's been in the Stanley Cup Finals a lot over the last 5 years. So, I mean, not the worst thing. Just maybe have Patrick Maroon and Corey Perry, and you're guaranteed to get into the finals. Okay, well, let's we'll leave that one lie, okay, and we'll once we maybe hear more substantial things, we'll come back to it. Let's talk Minnesota Wild, because the Minnesota Wild are I think maybe even more unexpected, the fact that they're doing this poorly, other than maybe the Edmonton Oilers. Like, I don't think that there's a team that people saw and went, oh yeah, this team is going to not only be not a playoff team, but they're just going to be awful. And they have been awful. What's your take on Dean Evason being fired? The Wild's poor start of the year, 20 games or 19 games in with only 14 points and a minus 20 goal differential.
Ooh, that's those are a lot of bad numbers there, eh? I mean, the fact is, they've lost 7 in a row. That doesn't help anybody, right? But they're second worst in the league as far as goals against per game are concerned. They have the league's worst penalty kill right now at 66%. And you know what? Say what you want about personnel, right? Guys can't get out there and get it done, but I don't know if I've ever seen a power play this bad. And with the talent they have up front, you have to figure you're not sitting dead last in penalty kill. You're not sitting in the bottom 10 as far as power play is concerned. And when you look at all these numbers, right? It's again, it goes back to that old adage where it's easier to fire a coach than it is to change guys in the locker room, right?
Sure. So, especially right now with the way the cap is in this flat cap era. Last year of the flat cap era, really, it's like this is it. You can't move guys. Right. Exactly. But the bottom line is I just look back at that Dallas game, and I think that was really the tipping point where this all kind of started, right? I mean, back in mid-November when they lost 8-2 to Dallas, they give up 5 power play goals and 2 shorthanded goals. I'm like, bro, that to me, I looked at that game and I'm like, this is the beginning of the end for Evason. It seemed like he lost the locker room, right? They need a spark. You look at some of the players' numbers on this team, and yes, you could just say that some guys are having down seasons, but overall, right? Kirill Kaprizov being the first name on that list.
Right. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I've said for, the last few years that this team really needs a true number one center, but that aside, they have good enough personnel to get this done, right? They should be playing better than they are.
At least to be in contention for a playoff spot. I mean, they've right. done a really nice job at compiling a team with basically what we're talking like they're working with 20% less cap available than everyone else in the league. And that is going to be the excuse, I think, is that sure. They are operating basically they could have 2 or 3 really good players if they had that cap money available, definitely 2. And they don't, but that's, last year they did just fine and they were kind of in a similar situation. So you would think that they'd be able to get it done. It just has not been happening. And yeah, I guess their only choice really was to say, let's try to find a new voice. Yeah.
And, is John Hein the right voice? I don't know.
He always has gotten teams off to hot starts though.
Absolutely true. Yeah.
Did it in New Jersey, did it in Nashville.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, though, is I don't see him as a long-term solution for this team. However, I agree with you. I think he's a good short-term solution for this team. Always gets guys off to a good start. And the nice thing is, too, I know they've been playing pretty poor, but you really look at the standings and, the way the Central Division is, they could potentially, it's pretty easy right now. You look at St. Louis, right? They've got the top wild card spot, and Calgary somehow has managed to crawl their way back into a wild card position. But they're really only, what's the math here? 9 points out from St. Louis, and over the course of 3/4 of a season still left, that's a number easy to make up at this point, I think. And for a team that where we hit, as poorly as everybody else is kind of playing, no one from that Central really wants to take the ball and run with it, in my opinion, between St. Louis, Nashville, and Arizona. So there's potential to make up some ground there pretty easily. Again, they get guys playing just a smidge better and get a little bit better defense out of this team. I think you could easily turn this around and contend for a wild card spot.
Here's what worries me. Yes, they have 14 points. 4 of those points have come because of overtime losses. You're looking at a team that is 5-14. Whereas Nashville's 10-10.
Sure.
Nashville has been a much better team than Minnesota. It's a 6-point difference. That's pretty significant when you draw that out over another. You multiply all these numbers by 4. That's like a 24-point difference between these teams. But yes, they could get back into it. We'll see what John Hines can do. What based on his time in New Jersey, his time in Nashville, is that the forecheck is going to be on in Minnesota. John Hines is known for implementing a pretty aggressive forecheck, and I think based on, I'm sure that Bill Guerin's going, all right, we've got some speed, but we've got guys that are really heavy, and if we can get in on that forecheck and we can punish teams maybe a little more than we have been, I think speeding the game up a little bit from Minnesota. Now, they may not have the right players to do that, but bringing in a John Hines, you are certainly going, we are going to get faster, because his style of play has always been to push guys to forecheck, and it'll be interesting to see how that changes for Minnesota. Oh, well, I think there's a few. Do you have anything else left about Minnesota that you wanted to throw out there?
Okay. You know what? I'm interested to see where this goes. And, unfortunately, like you talked about, they don't have money to spend. So it'll be interesting to see if we see some call-ups or some personnel shuffling here as far as players are concerned. Because, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind seeing some younger guys get the call up and maybe trying to shake things up that way.
By the way, John Hines was with the New Jersey Devils for 4.5 seasons, and he was with the Nashville Predators for three seasons plus. He got fired right around this time in 2019 when he was the coach of the Nashville Predators. Or sorry, when he was fired by New Jersey, it was December 3rd. So it was 3.5 is maybe pushing it a little bit. With the Nashville Predators, he didn't get fired until after the season was over, so he lasted the full 4 years there in Nashville. So basically 4 years for both teams. When you say, I know you mentioned you don't think this is the long-term solution, does that sound about right, like a 3 to 4 year time frame with him, or do you think even less?
I honestly, I think even less. It wouldn't surprise me if next year when we start seeing the cap go up quite a bit, next season they've got $10 million of projected cap space. They've got a couple roster spots on that back end open, and they could use, like I said, a number one center. Maybe, depending on, what kind of players Bill Guerin wants to target, he might say, you know what, this is a perfect excuse for me to bring in the guy that I really want and, see if we can't make it work, because,
well, I feel like the guy he really wanted was Dean Evason. That was his guy. Like, he brought him in.
You might be onto that.
And that was his guy. I think that's why he lasted so longer, as long as he did, because he was his guy. And so I wonder, hey, John Hines, he's in that nice position where he's been a coach for 2 different teams. He's had some success. Neither one of those teams was... Like, you think about Nashville at the end of his tenure, fired at the end of last year. You think about that team and you go, how much of it was his fault that they didn't win? He did a pretty darn good job keeping that team competitive for the amount of time that he did. And I wonder if Bill Guerin's looking at that going, he took a New Jersey team that was bad. He took them to the playoffs his first year. That was the year that Taylor Hall won the Hart Trophy. And he's still the Devils were not very good, but that wasn't his fault. They just didn't have anybody. And you could say, hey, because of his coaching, they got Jack Hughes. But then in Nashville, they were they're at the end of their cycle, and that's not his fault that, a lot of those players were just kind of having down years, and they were at the end of their cycle, and they weren't going to win. They were thinking about rebuilding. It was always this should we rebuild? Oh, maybe not. Maybe we should keep on going. Oh, no, maybe we should. Because, I wonder, was that John Hines? Did John Hines just squeeze everything that you could get out of the Nashville Predators like a really old tube of toothpaste? I think that he's probably in a really great position here because he's going to be starting out with low expectations, and those expectations will rise as he goes. And if he can keep squeezing out as much as he has other places, I think he'll do really well in Minnesota.
Well, I will say, I think he's going to have a pretty short leash here. I think, obviously there's this year, but he'll probably get all of next year. to do something. And then if, really, if they're not competitive, he's going to be gone because you're going to get both of Parise and Suter's money off the books. You're going to be in the final year of Kaprizov's deal. So I think it's going to be one last swing for the fences kind of move to make them, a playoff Stanley Cup contender. And, you might lose Kaprizov if they're not. And then, of course, then it's just at that point, you're just rebuilding.
Yep. Very true. And you can decide whether he's sticking around for a rebuild or not. And also, it does give you that option of, well, if a coach becomes available and he wants to coach there, well, then you could fire him. If you don't have a better option, then you just stick with him. He's a good coach. He's a good coach. He's proven that he's a good coach. And with this being his third team, a lot of times, this is what it takes. It takes these guys, they bounce around a couple times, and then they kind of find their groove. And, maybe in 2 or 3 years, Minnesota's able to kind of bolster the rest of this roster, and suddenly they're in contention, and he's in a really good place.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, to add to that, too, when Bill Guerin was the assistant GM of the Penguins, the AHL coach there in Wilkes-Barre Scranton was John Hines.
All right, there it is. There's the connection. So he's another one of his guys, is what you're saying.
Could be.
Okay, let's move on to the Detroit Red Wings, who have officially signed Patty Kane to just over $2 million on the AAV. The floor is yours, my friend, as the resident Detroit Red Wings fan, signing the enemy, bringing him into your house, and here you go. If you had told the Justin 10 years ago, no, we'll go 15 years ago, like 2008, that, hey, someday Patrick Kane is going to don a Red Wings sweater, what would you have said?
Oh, boy. I said I would have loved to have seen this
Red
Wings sweater.
Yourself.
I always loved Patty Kane and Jonathan Toews when they were the Blackhawks. I hated the Hawks because, when the Wings were in the West, they always seemed to, meet each other in the first or second round. But
I wonder if the Hawks hadn't won in 2009, I think the Wings would have won the Cup.
That very well,
I think they would have won the Cup.
A real possibility for sure.
Yeah.
That 09-10 team was just, it was ridiculous. But
well, that 08-09, 09 was 09. 09's Pittsburgh. 09's Pittsburgh. Yeah, 09-10. Yes. That's right.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that back-to-back Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Is that the one where was Chicago up? Detroit was up 3-1 in the series, and Chicago came back. Was that year? 2010.
I don't know. I will have to look that up.
I'll look it up. You tell us what you think about Patrick Kane coming to the Detroit Red Wings.
Look, this is a low-risk move for the Red Wings. They get a guy who obviously the big concern is what kind of player are you getting, right? This hip resurfacing surgery is, it's pretty much ended careers, right? You see what's going on with Nicholas Backstrom. Obviously I think they both kind of had different types of surgeries. I'm not a medical expert, but look, I've watched the training videos of Patty Kane. He looks like he's in good shape right now. It doesn't look like he's having any mobility issues, but he's still 35 years old, right? So obviously the Wings are going to do their best to ease him into it. Apparently, the difference was he likes Derek Lalonde. He's an X and O's kind of guy that Patty Kane really likes. Apparently, Steve Yzerman was the only general manager outside of Toronto because he was training there to actually fly out and meet with him. So those were two big pluses for Detroit. And then, of course, getting to play with Alex DeBrincat, I think that kind of sealed Detroit's fate a little bit that they were going to get to sign this guy. So, again, I think this is a very low-risk move for Detroit. The great thing is they get a guy who, if he comes back and he's even like 75% of what he was last year or the year before, you're still getting, a 50, 60-point guy. And that, to me, is so valuable, especially with his veteran Stanley Cup experience. You're trying to get a Red Wing team over the hump into the playoffs. And this very well, even if he's limited to 12 or 13 minutes a night, this is a guy who can do that for you, right? You play him on special teams. You get him out there on the second line with, Alex DeBrincat. This could really pay off for you very, very well. And the nice thing is because his contract is only for $2.75, that still leaves the Detroit Red Wings with, roughly $19 million in deadline cap space, right? And I say that right now, but that's where they're at right now. So that number shrinks a little bit, but still, they're going to have plenty of money at the deadline to make another big move if they're in, a playoff spot right now. So you've given Detroit a lot of options. You've given them a quality guy who's going to be there for the course of the year. Now, I know Patty Kane wanted a multi-year deal, obviously didn't get it. He was looking at Florida and Detroit basically at the end, and I know New York was in that mix too, but they just, couldn't afford to sign him. So Obviously things have kind of changed today with Capo Caco going on LTIR and Philip Hedl as well. So, but yeah, I kind of go back just to his veteran leadership, his knowledge, and his hockey IQ is going to be so valuable for a younger Detroit team that has a forward group that is fourth best in the league at scoring goals right now. This is just going to be just another bonus for this forward group up front to add, to their top six.
Yeah, I think honestly, this is what I think happened. Patrick Kane, Yzerman, they're talking, and Patty Kane is saying, or his representatives are saying, he wants a multi-year deal. And Yzerman's going, we will re-sign him happily. If he's decent enough, we'll just re-sign him. Like, we're not gonna not bring him back. If he wants to be here, we want him here. He just has to prove that he can go out and that he's healthy. And we can't risk that he's not healthy for next year. Because next year, if this is how competitive we are this year without Patrick Kane, and we still have a bunch of young guys that are, that we're trying to bring up onto the lineup and bring along, like there's more coming here for the Red Wings. We don't want to give up any of that leverage and waste salary space. So I think that's where you find yourself going, we'll give you another deal if just prove you're not hurt.
Yep, absolutely. And not only that, but it gives them flexibility in their top six now. So now they can, keep Larkin together with Raymond and move, Alex DeBrincat down to the second line with, Patty Kane on his other wing, so that way you have two very formidable, lines up there at your top six, which is ideally what, most Stanley Cup teams really need, right? If you're relying on one line, it's just not really going to play out very well unless you're the Boston Bruins. But for me again too, you kind of go back to a lot of those younger guys, right? We're still, Michael Rasmussen, we're still waiting on him to really just explode. He's just not there yet. Joe Veleno, he's looked pretty good, but he's not a top six guy yet. He's just not there. And then if, for any reason, Lucas Raymond just, bottoms out or just doesn't keep his progression going, there's no pressure on him to be a top six guy if you bring in a guy like Patty Kane, because you can move him up and down, right? You could say, okay, cool, well, we're just going to stack the top line with DeBrincat, Larkin, and Patty Kane, and then let, Raymond go in there and, play 14, 15 minutes on that second, third line and just, kind of find his game again, right? There's no pressure on him.
Yeah. Well, that goes both ways, right? Like,
yep.
I think Lucas Raymond is a really important piece for Patrick Kane coming in, because Lucas Raymond can play in the top six. Things have kind of pulled back for him. Like, it doesn't look as shiny as it once did in his rookie season, but
I still think he's a 60, 70-point guy. Sure.
I still think that he has lots of potential. 16 points through 20 games. It's not as if he's off to a terrible start. He's on pace for about 60 points. But you can shift him if you need to give Patrick Kane those easy minutes. Like, I think right now you want to give Kane all the easy minutes that you can 5-on-5. Yep. All the easy minutes. Like, you're going to see his offensive zone face-off percentage is likely going to be 65% or higher.
Here
in the first 10 games. Yeah,
for sure.
Right. I think that when it comes to Lucas Raymond, he's going to protect Patrick Kane. You certainly could use him the other way once Kane gets back, but it's going to be there needs to be a lot of patience, because I don't see Patrick Kane coming back and lighting the world on fire. Like, yes, he's been training. Yes, he says he's ready. He didn't do training camp. He's coming off this crazy surgery. He's more or less, we'll say, he's been sitting around, and it's going to take him some time. I think your hope is that by March that he's feeling it. And if I'm a Wings fan, I'm happy to let the best player who's been willing to sign in Detroit in 10 years take all the time that he needs to find himself. Because if it means come playoff time, well, if it means the Wings are in the playoffs, I think every Wings fan is happy. I think the league is happy if Detroit's back in the playoffs, because it's always better when the Red Wings are in the playoffs. And if Patrick Kane can be at least a shade of himself, then I think you'll be more than happy waiting a few months for that to come to fruition. If he can only play 12, 13 minutes a game for a little while and he's still finding his legs and he doesn't have a ton of points, you're looking at a Kane with like 15 points in 40 games. Honestly, I think that's fine. Other than maybe the power play. Like he'll pick up points on the power play, but I'm just talking 5-on-5. If he only has 10, 15 points 5-on-5, I don't think that it's anything to worry about, because if you're going to jump in to a player with having this hip surgery, you have to know they are just not going to be good at first.
Right.
Now, he is Patrick Kane. Yes, Tyler Seguin's an excellent player. Yes, Jamie Benn was an excellent player, and they both had similar surgeries. But this is Patrick Kane. Sorry, Seguin, but you don't get to be on the same boat as Patrick Kane. You're in the dinghy and Patrick Kane is on the yacht. That is how much Patrick Kane was at one point top 3 player in the league. Probably one of the most underrated, underappreciated players in the league, because he was kind of a douchebag and people just they didn't like him. Remember after all that, that taxi cab stuff beat the living hell out of that guy, and he was just kind of this punk that nobody liked. Mm-hmm. I took a little while, once he put on the America Superman deal in the All-Star game, I think people started to warm up to him, but I think he's kind of been underrated. Has anybody really talked about him? Hey, he was, maybe best 3 players in the world at one point. It was Sidney Crosby and Malkin and maybe Patrick Kane to be in that conversation. For those early 2010s, Patrick Kane was the guy. One of the few wingers to ever be able to drive a line as well. So, give me your prediction where this is going with Kane. Let's start goals. And by goals, I mean the amount of times that he scores. Not what are your life goals, Patrick? There are 62 games left in the season. I don't know what game. Have they said anything about, hey, Patrick's going to come and play in this game?
No, I haven't heard anything, and it's funny, though, because the next 2 games for the Wings are against the Rangers and the Blackhawks. So a little poetic. They came out now.
I wonder if they just let him avoid that game against the Blackhawks.
Right. Well, I don't think he's going to play for at least another 4 or 5 games.
Okay. Okay. So a week to 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks. Is what
at least I think, anyways, in my opinion. But I could be wrong. He could be pretty damn. I mean, he could come into practice and be ready in game shape and almost ready to go. But I doubt that. I think they're going to ease him into this. Right, it'll take a few games at least. So let's just say, safely, let's call it 60 games. Right, so he misses 2 or 3 games in there. Right, best case scenario. To me, with 60, I wouldn't be surprised if we see maybe 15 goals and maybe 20 assists. So if I saw 35 to 40 points out of him in these last 60 games, I would be more than thrilled with his production.
Yeah, I think a point every other game kind of vibe.
Yes, and I think where he'll really kick it up a notch is if the Wings make the playoffs, they're in there. I think then we could pretty much see a 0.75 kind of point per game player right now for Patty Kane.
Yeah, I just hope that we see a Patrick Kane who looks like Patrick Kane. That's what I know he's made all the videos and it's gone around and he's back to normal and he's better than he was, which, hey, he's been playing on this bad hip for, I don't know, a couple years now. Mm-hmm. And he still was pretty darn good on the bad hip. I'm just wondering, if you have this surgery, theoretically, you shouldn't have a surgery that makes you worse than when you weren't having the surgery, right? That's it seems like you have the surgery and then you should at least not be in pain and maybe, the same as you were before, but just not in pain. So therefore you're a little better. That to me is worst case scenario. You'd think if you're going to have a surgery and a doctor said, well, we don't really know if this is going to make it better. Well, why the frick would you have the surgery? So I think that you have to assume that he's going to be a little bit better in terms of the skating. And that maybe is the issue. For Seguin, the issue was he used so much speed and then he slowed way down and his game wasn't meant for it. Jamie Benn was already slow and he slowed down, and he just couldn't keep up. And he's since, I would say that he's since kind of like fully recovered from this surgery. It took what, 3 years for Ben to not be garbage again?
Yeah, I also think Ben kind of had to adjust his game a little bit too, right?
That too.
He couldn't be the same guy. So maybe,
whereas Patrick Kane doesn't totally work from he was fast, but he has so many other tools. He's that's why he's a Hall of Fame player. He's such a rarity where he has the shot, he has the playmaking ability, he had the skating, and even if the skating drops off a little bit, he still has all these other tools, which, hey, at least is going to give you something on the power play.
Yep, absolutely. I think his hockey IQ is just so off the charts, and he can still, regardless if, you don't have that speed there anymore, right? He can still pass it just as good as anybody else. Yeah. And so, again, whether or not he ends up with DeBrincat or with somebody else, the Wings have enough fast guys on their team where I think they can still find a way to make him fit in there.
Yep, I am, because DeBrincat and Larkin have gelled so well together. I am curious, of course, there's the Kane DeBrincat thing. Kane kind of was the spark that really drove Alex DeBrincat to such a good rookie season, sophomore season. I wonder if they try and pair them back together, but I don't know if Kane can play on that top line. So it might be something where, when the game gets in a weird spot and you need a goal, maybe you put Kane out there with those two. But I don't know that you can play him enough minutes to play them together all the time.
Well, I honestly think that Detroit saw this signing coming, because the last couple games, Detroit moved DeBrincat off that line with Larkin and bumped him down on the second line with Andrew Kopp there, or with JT Compher. So you've already kind of seen him, DeBrincat. He scored a couple goals. He's kind of got a little bit of his mojo from the beginning of the season back. So you can see that he's kind of, doing well without Larkin per se, right? So and Larkin and Raymond still have their chemistry, and they're still playing very, very well. So I think what you wanted to see that out of the Wings, so they could potentially split up, and put DeBrincat and Kane on another line, and then Larkin and Raymond on another line. And then, of course, if you need to, you can do like, McDavid and Draisaitl, put them on the same line where you can move DeBrincat. And,
right. You can go super line when you need it. Right. And the rest of the time you can kind of spread out the love a little bit. I think in an ideal world, if Kane can come back and he really is the Patrick Kane we remember, who could maybe drive a line, then you give him his own line, and suddenly you've got three good lines. It's like an exciting, you don't want to get ahead of yourself, because you assume that he's just not going to be the Patrick Kane we remember. Like, he's still going to be good, but we can't assume that he's going to be 100-point Patrick Kane. But you almost want to. You're like, but what if? Could you imagine if Patrick Kane was truly a point-per-game player, could drive his own line? All of a sudden, Detroit is like, there might not be a Stanley Cup contender, but they all of a sudden, you're worried if you have to play them in the first round. Because maybe they could squeeze something out. Right. And if they're coming in going, it doesn't really matter if we win this. Like, there's no pressure on this. That can be a dangerous thing as well. And there are enough veterans on this team who know how to win. So this Patrick Kane signing has the potential to make the Red Wings maybe one of the more interesting teams in the Eastern Conference, because they're really coming out of nowhere. And I know we all expected them to get better. We just expected them to maybe be on a different trajectory, and they have essentially taken that like Toronto Maple Leafs trajectory of like, hey, we're bad, and oh wow, we made the playoffs really quickly, as opposed to these Ottawa ones where you're like, wow, you've been bad for 10 years. Buffalo, you've been bad for 10 years. And I know the Wings rebuild has been kind of going on for a little bit, but they've always had some decent players. Okay. Patrick Kane signs with the Wings. We'll see how that goes. And once we get word of when his first official game will be, we'll talk through how that game went. I know we were going to talk. We're about 40 minutes in, so we'll end the show on this little segment where we wanted to talk through current teams that are in the playoffs that missed the playoffs last year. Maybe we'll just hit a couple of them. We can hit the Eastern Conference teams where that is the case, although that is really two teams because we already talked about the Detroit Red Wings, so we can just kind of if you have any more to add about the Wings in the playoffs, that's totally fine. But then that's also the Philadelphia Flyers are the one other team that are in the playoff picture that missed the playoffs last year. In the Western Conference, you're looking at the Vancouver Canucks, the St. Louis Blues, and Calgary made the playoffs last year. Yeah. No. Did they? No. They missed the playoffs. Okay, we got three teams in the Western Conference who are weren't in the playoffs last year that are this year. So that's 5 teams total. That's a pretty solid number of teams if that were to hold true. Which team you want to talk about here? That's in the playoffs right now.
Ooh, I get to pick. Okay. I mean, I could easily pick Vancouver. I think that's an easy one, but instead
I won't.
But I won't. I would rather talk about the Philadelphia Flyers right now.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. That's definitely the one where if you said, hey, St. Louis is going to make a run at the playoffs this year, I think you'd be like, okay, I can see it. Calgary, okay, I can see it. Even Vancouver, okay, I can see it. Like they could be a bubble team, although they've been better than a bubble team. But Philadelphia, no. I don't even think Daniel Briere saw his team making the playoffs this year. I don't know if Tortorella saw his team making the playoffs this year, but here they are sitting in third place in the Metro, 11-9-1. I'm not sure this lasts, but right now they are in the playoff picture.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with you. I'm not sure it lasts either, but
hey, a +6 goal differential too. That is good for second in the Metropolitan Division.
Yeah, I will say the nice thing is they're getting good goaltending, right? From not only Carter Hart, but they're also getting it from Samuel Urson. When he's been called upon every 3 or 4 games, he steps up and has looked pretty good. And I know that because I often pick him up in fantasy on the odd night that he's playing because I do have Carter Hart.
You just you have your one rotating guy in fantasy that you can just drop and pick up at it. Yep.
Yeah, but they're getting contributions from guys up and down the lineup, right? I think that's the difference we're seeing this year versus last year's Philadelphia Flyer team, right? Like we know Owen Tippett we were probably going to get relatively same production, but we've got Sean Couturier back, so you've got your legit number one center, a guy who can play he's a poor man's Patrice Bergeron in my opinion. So he does everything so well on both sides of the puck, and I think he's doing a great job of contributing. Both offensively and defensively, but then you're getting other guys on this team, like for example, you're getting Bobby Brink, chipping in. You're getting Joel Farabee, who's contributing. You're getting all these guys just giving you what you need from a depth perspective that typically you weren't getting the last couple of years in Philadelphia. And not only that, but I think when they were making moves and shipping out guys like Kevin Hayes, for example. Right, it was kind of like, oh, we're going to go through this rebuild really quick, but John Tortorella has come out and been playing about it and like, listen, I'm not here to coach a rebuild, so fuck you, Marty Biron. I'm gonna coach, or Danny Briere. I'm gonna coach my way into the playoffs.
Yeah, why'd you have to bring Martin Biron into this? What did you do?
I'm sorry, but again, you're getting that depth scoring, which I think is so important, and not only that, but you're getting it from defenders as well, right? I mean, they brought in Sean Walker, who I think is doing a great job, leading that back end along with, some other guys back there like Nick Seeler, who's been a pleasant surprise. And, they're just playing so well analytically, but also, it was very unexpected, right? I think this, on paper, when I looked at this Philadelphia Flyers team, I just look at it and say, okay, cool. This is a team that I can easily pencil in at the bottom of this division.
Yes.
But nobody in the Metro has said, you know what? Besides the Rangers, no one else has come out and said, you know what? We want this. This is going to be our division. Yes. So
yeah, I mean, because Philadelphia is. I mean, Washington has 3 games in hand on them, and they're 1 point back. You have to assume Washington's getting at least 2 points out of those, so that's gonna bump some teams down here, but. The Islanders are kind of in the same place. They've got a game in hand. Pittsburgh has a game in hand, but they're 3 points back. Everything's really tight. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Philadelphia makes the playoffs. I don't even think it's a foregone conclusion that Philadelphia doesn't still end up near the bottom of this division. But they are having a heck of a good start. New Jersey looks terrible, and suddenly the Fire Lindy chants need to start again in New Jersey, I think, because that seemed to be
I'm giving Jersey a pass because they had Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier out for quite a while there.
Yeah.
So anytime you lose your number one and number two for so long. So, but again, at New Jersey over the next 5-10 games, if they don't pick it up, man, they're going to dig themselves quite a big hole where it'll be too hard to come back from.
Yeah. I mean, hey, they win their next 2 games, they're tied with Philadelphia. So it's not as if they're way out of it. And you're right, they have had some injuries, but I mean, they're also only a point ahead of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Who I know they played 4 more games, but still. Still. You're barely ahead of Columbus. Come on. But yeah, 3-7 in their last 10. They did win their last game, but New Jersey has not looked very good. But yes, Philadelphia, I mean, huge surprise, but also is it a huge surprise that a John Tortorella team is playing above their weight? They're punching above their weight right now. And something that didn't really get talked about, talked a lot about in the offseason was Sean Couturier. Like, hey, is he coming back? We did mention it, and I think it was like, well, I'm not sure. Nobody was sure if he was coming back, and then all of a sudden it was, oh, he's coming back. He's saying he's healthy, and you're like, I don't know if I believe that. And hey, now he's centering a pretty darn good line with Konechny and Forster, and I think that has given new life to the Flyers. I mean, they have severely missed their number one center last year, and really the last 2 years. And I mean, how often have we seen it? You get a number one center, and what it does to your organization is tremendous, and it allows other guys to play in the right roles. And I think we're seeing it. And hey, John Tortorella, if the Philadelphia Flyers make the playoffs this year and he doesn't win Coach of the Year, then I just give up. Like somebody different needs to vote on that award, because hands down he should. If they make the playoffs, he wins that thing.
Yeah, I'm giving that one to Todd McClellan right now, but still, I agree with you. If the Flyers get in, you got to give it to Torts based upon what he's got on that roster right now. Yep,
for sure. All right, well, that is our show. We'll hit more playoff teams on our next show, but we'll keep on riding through what has been a pretty crazy regular season so far. Several coaching firings, and we'll check back in with the Oilers. We just couldn't talk about them this time because I feel like we've been talking about them every single week. So we need to take a little breather from Western Canada, but we'll be back. Don't worry. And enjoy the games, Justin. Next time we talk, you may be a father. I think that's
most likely.
Right. We're getting close. So have fun with that. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. Follow us on Twitter @OT Hockey Talk. We will talk to you guys soon.